Hello, everyone. Good evening. We are setting up here, but I thought I will start so don't keep you suspended to kind of know what's happening. We are joining you tonight, Dr. Cohen and I, and we'll be talking about toxicity, calmness, and what can we do in these times to find the right balance, what is right for us. Just as a reminder that Dr. Cohen's office is open for business, and as you see these wonderful products that could support us all through these challenging times, especially the ones in California. If any of you were affected by the smoke, we have a very good protocol for your lung support, for your um, respiratory system. So if any of you again have any questions about that, please reach out to the office, and you know how to find us, either through Facebook page or through our phone number. So yeah, have another great lecture tonight, and it's going to be about 45 minutes of the lecture, and after that, Dr. Cohen will guide us through his wonderful meditations. If you have any questions, I'll be curating the messages and relaying questions back to Dr. Cohen. As always, enjoy your evening, and thank you for joining us tonight, and looking forward to learning together. Dr. Cohen, take it away.
Thank you. Okay, everybody. Does everybody know where energy comes from? It's important to know that. Every cell of our body, its energy system, the Krebs cycle, is governed by the mitochondria. And when the mitochondria is stressed, we get fatigued. What stresses us? Probably the most powerful stressor is the unknown. And if you look at today's news, which I made a mistake to look at, we have so many stressors that it's amazing that we can stay calm and focused and be productive in our lives. So what is the mitochondria? Mitochondria is basically a primitive bacteria where we express. So let me back up a little bit. A cardiac mitochondria, so each cell that goes to the heart can have 450 mitochondria. That's how important the cardio system is. How does innovation come through? It's communication between the mitochondria and our cells communicating with our microbiome, which is mostly in the gut. So this week, there was some exciting research that came out. At least for me, it was exciting. They're seeing a relationship with immunity to the COVID-19 virus with retained activity of the thymus and the T4 regulatory cells. Now, if you have a stressed out mitochondria in your body, the epinephrine, which is the stress hormone, the one that gives us anxiety and stuff, shuts down the ability for us to produce energy. And if we're going to survive today's news, which we had a dramatic in the Gulf, a phase 4 hurricane just suddenly come up. 70% wasn't there, and then within a few hours it was there, which is the heating up of the planet. And we have close to 180,000 people in the United States that have died from COVID-19. And even though people are saying that that's probably not correct and is blaming lots of things that weren't COVID, actually, when I looked at the data, it was actually low. We probably had more deaths than that. Now, why some of us are healthy? Well, some of us have been tuning in here for 6 months and learning some of the things we can do to prevent ourselves from becoming diminished and sick and vulnerable. And getting older or getting stressed doesn't mean we're necessarily going to fall apart and not live. That we have opportunities. We can be over 100. And I come from a family where my great aunt, I think her name was Ida, never met her. She was before my time. She lived to 106 and lived independent to 103. And she lived through tremendous turmoil in her life. And what did she do to stay fit? A whole foods diet. She's the one that introduced my mother and taught my mother about a standard process diet and supplements. And my mother lived to either 97, 98, 99, depending on which document you looked at. Continued to work till 97 and drive a car till 97, maybe even older. So living a part of nature, even though nature is rebelling against us. Climate change. As soon as there's climate change, you get an aberration of the viral and microbial world. Suddenly, as the climate changes, the microbes adapt by changing. And if you remember correctly, we talked about that if your immune system can't read the change, it's going to over rebel. So, what are the things that we can do? And we'll talk about a few people that survived the virus. The immune system will have to adapt and relearn what's a pathogen, what we can't live with. And many of you were given tremendous tools how to do that. So, what are some of the things that I've seen people thrive no matter what's going on around them? One is a sense of purpose and a sense of deep relaxation. So, you can call it meditation, you can talk of visualization, you can talk about taking care of people, but all of them have that connection. So every week here, we've been doing, mostly every week, we've been doing forms of meditation to reset our nervous system so it can adapt to the changes. Now, a number of years ago, I was reading about Christopher Reeves, who was Superman, that he was looking for a solution for his condition, and being paralyzed from falling from a horse that missed its jump. And he went and visited with one of the great scientists of our time, Michael Schwartz to be actual. And she's a neuroscientist with the lab at the Weizmann Institute. And she told him that he was about 25 years ahead of his time, but eventually they will solve this. And one of the things she talked about was the effect on the brain. If the brain, after trauma, is not repaired, you're going to have permanent disability in the shortened lifespan. And one is the permeability of the blood-brain barrier. So the blood-brain barrier protects our brain from the effects of trauma. So up until probably the 1980s, most, especially in the US, we were treating trauma victims in emergency rooms with steroids in an attempt to shut down the nervous system. It was felt that the immune reaction in the brain was an aberration that was part of the trauma. And she proved that the cells that were trying to reduce the effects of the trauma were actually the solution. That she asked the question, and like we talked about many times, great people ask the right questions. One of my spiritual teachers taught me that when I was very young. Don't worry about the answers, worry about the right questions. And she said, very simple, and the director of the Weizmann Institute, which is one of the top 10 research institutes in the world, encouraged her to ask the question, how could the most important organ of the body not have an immune system? And when you thought about it, it doesn't make any sense. Of course the brain would have an immune system. But we didn't access the immune system of the brain through the blood-brain barrier. She went searching and found it someplace, if you look up in an anatomy book, or it's the choroid plexus. There were microscopic openings, and the thymus, which was where our immune cells, the T immune cells, which govern our response to trauma, but also to pathology, would enter the brain through this choroid plexus. And that changed history. At first it was in the Scandinavia, and then in Europe, the emergency rooms stopped suppressing the immune system, the response to the trauma. They started stimulating it. And when they stimulated, depending on how much damage, the chances of getting a recovery or a partial recovery went way up. And so I was reading this week that these same T4 regulatory cells that regulate our immune response, and one of the damages we have when we have a viral overload, it's called a cytokine storm. And once I saw that that was what was happening, and I remembered Mikhail Schwartz's work that literally changed my career and my life. And people ask me, why did I get such miraculous cures when nobody else could cure? It was basically from exposing myself to people like Mikhail Schwartz. And Mikhail Schwartz and the T4 regulatory cells, which we've also had in our whole food tradition. There's a product in standard process called Thymex, which if you break it down, we don't have time tonight to really look and see what Thymex is, but it's an old cure, and it's helped in so many things, including cancers and traumas and ongoing infection. It's basically the T4 regulatory cells. So people were finding these truths, but nobody was putting them together until she did it, that was how our system works. And now they're finding that certain people get exposed and they don't even know it to these T4 regulatory cells, and that becomes embedded in the immune system, and they have partial immunity to these viruses, particularly the stealth viruses, the hidden viruses. And we also know that the COVID-19 virus is one that migrated from places where many mammals, where it came from, their immune system learned to be immune. But humans never in the history of this planet ever got to these locations. And then all of a sudden, people started visiting these remote jungles, which are extremely difficult to find, and we found all kinds of things there, including to a human species that's not quite human that was living in these remote things. So the elegance of life becomes more profound the more we get exposed to. And the more that we dissipate our ignorance and respect sciences. And I've said this before, that I've known quite a few scientists and worked with them. And anybody that doesn't respect their diligence, when I got too excited, I would stay up all night and I would call a scientific friend because he'd be up at 3, 4 in the morning still working on research, staying alone. And that's what's going on today. So if anybody tells you that this viral pandemic is false, it's only ignorance. It's real. People are dying from it. We have to evolve further. We have to make sure if we're getting fatigued, that we do adaptogenic therapies, that we get enough rest, and we reduce the American habit of pushing ourselves till our immune system has to alter to adapt to the pressure, and then it becomes limited in how it can rescue us from pathology.
I think that was very interesting. And but one of the questions that I had as I was listening to you, what does fatigue have to do with toxicity?
Well, fatigue is toxicity. When you alter something and your body doesn't recognize it, it becomes, over time, it becomes toxic. It starts destroying ourselves, destroying our immunity. Remember, we develop immunity over time.
Mm-hmm.
And if we poison our immune cells, in other words, remember we went over that it's calcium bicarbonate,
Yeah.
vitamin D, and vitamin F.
Mm-hmm.
And if you replace one of them, you get an altered reality.
Because there's such a pandemic, other than COVID pandemic today, there's such a pandemic of fatigue. I definitely remember when I used to work here, every other patient that would come in through a door with a bunch of other issues and problems, but low energy, tiredness, and fatigue was one of the most common complaints that patients have in this clinic. How do you go about addressing that and helping patients to restore that energy and vitality?
First of all, they have to bite the bullet and clear out the poisons from their body. There's no way around it. If we overload our immune system, but also our immune cells and also our gut, our heart, our liver, our intestines,
Mm-hmm.
with literally what our system wasn't designed to run on, it's going to break down. And scientists have coming up with new tests that we to test the chemicals, and then we figure out programs to not only eliminate the chemicals, but to replace them with fuel. And fuel is what feeds our mitochondria. So if you're not resting and recuperating every day, you're overloading your system with mitochondrial poison. And we have an idea here that I wish somebody could figure out how this started, because it's not normal. No traditional society has this delusion that you can feed people more poison when they break down, giving them more chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that chemicals, which are poisons, can rescue us from the consequences of a lifetime of things breaking down. One of the things that breaks down is people stop eating real food. Food is this. Second thing is people eat things that are full of sugar. I think we talked about once that up until 1865, according to research, there was hardly any diabetes in the hospitals. There's other things, many to do with cleanliness and infection and hygiene. But diabetes they found 3 cases in 15 years at Massachusetts General. Then in 1865, they figured out how to make synthetic sugar, and everybody felt that they suddenly became rich. And people started feasting on sugar. When they used to eat 3 pounds a year, they started getting up to over 100, and then we even got up recently up to 160, 170. And with this COVID, people are overeating again and getting poisoned. And then you get children, God bless them, they feel they're entitled to more sugar. But sugar is empty. When you think of sugar, think of yourself as inflaming. When you inflame, your tissues and your system are in the process of falling apart.
So you said, it's toxicity, and detox is one of the ways you address that. You might want to spend a few minutes talking to our listeners about detox, because a lot of people come in here and they say, "Oh, I don't want to go on starvation diet. I don't want to, do there are so many detox."
Yeah, the people.
Every guru with a book has a detox plan and has a detox idea. How do you approach the detox in somebody's body who they suffer from fatigue and maybe have some bunch of other symptoms?
I once wrote a poem about gurus and peace plans and detox plans. It was a funny poem, and everybody seems to come up with a plan.
Yeah.
And the plan is to be you, and to eat real food that grows with real nutrients, and that is not synthetic, and there's no added chemicals. And then you have to individualize them. We know a lot from blood types.
Mm-hmm.
And we also know that people have different epigenetic history. Did I ever go over epigenetics?
We did in one lecture. I see some questions. I'm going to grab my laptop, but keep on talking to the camera. Just a minute.
Well, epigenetics, it gets recorded in our histones, and then the behavior of your great-grandparents and previous generations get passed on. So if you're poisoning yourself, you're really poisoning your future generations. And the best way to somebody, I can see one.
Yeah, I'm about to get to the.
Best way to detox from sugar. It's actually very simple. It's not that difficult because the best way to detox from sugar is prebiotics. What is prebiotics? It's root foods, what grows on the ground. You start eating them on a regular basis, not too long you stop craving sugar. Things like carrots and rutabaga and other foods. That to me is the best thing. I don't recommend people go on a starvation diet or even go on a what people call a detox diet, but I do recommend that we do a limited diet until we get the levels of toxicity and sugar down to a manageable level.
So we have a question from Deborah. Does fasting help the immune system? I see a lot of contradictory info about this. What's the best way to detox from sugar?
Not fasting. If you're addicted to sugar, if you go into a fast, you can go into a crisis. Like I told you, it's a limited diet that makes sure that your body is limiting the inflammation because the sugar is inflammation. You can change the word to inflammation from sugar and it's the same effect. And it's addictive because it's triggering the pleasures, your dopamine receptors. So one of the things, if you can afford to, is we can test and see which chemicals are off, and the shortcuts that we can do to speed it up. But there's no way of getting around it. So if your body experiences a chemical or a sugar, something synthetic and artificial, and it triggers dopamine, you're getting a signal that says, keep doing this. This is good for you.
But again, you said root vegetables. Again, a lot of people say root vegetables have a lot of sugar and starch, and
That's not the same thing. We're talking about synthetic sugar is the problem, not sugar. We don't live without sugar. Sugar is the energy for the mitochondria. But if we get synthetic sugar, that's where the problem is because you're blowing up a system. If every day you blow up your house and you're not replacing the bricks to rebuild your house, after a while you're not going to have a place to live. You need the nutrients the way it appears in nature because we all need energy. And sugar in the mitochondria is what gives us energy. Otherwise, we're totally fatigued and eventually we get seriously sick and die. So I would, uh, ideally, we want to be 50-50 because we need to repair and replace parts of our body that are broken and worn down. And you need natural sugar that appears in nature because nature packages the food with the nutrients to rebuild what you broke. The sugars already has the nutrients. When you go and buy I don't know, so a cupcake or what my mother used to torture me with was German chocolate cake. Then you're breaking everything down. It's, you could probably survive when you're young, but if you do that as you get older, you're going to get in trouble. And people, especially people that are addicted. So it's not. People get confused with sugar and food. Whole foods.
It is very confusing because there's the whole grains are sugar, root vegetables are sugar, and there's a lot of bad rep for all of these things, but
they're not explained correctly.
Yeah, but I think should be a balance, and there's a place for everything.
No, the sugar is part of life.
Yeah.
The synthetic sugar was whoever came up with that did a lot of damage to all of life. But you need sugar. It's in the food. We don't replace what's broken. Eventually, we dissipate. I get that a lot. A lot of people asking, but I can't eat fruit. It has sugar.
Yeah.
Sugar is not the problem. It's synthetic sugar without the nutrients as it appears in nature.
The fibers and the nutrients.
And there are people that now have the epigenetic problem, which is a long lecture, but basically the epigenetic problem was we start becoming allergic to natural sugars. And we start getting reaction and say every time I eat something with sugar, I get really sick. And the natural sugar is trying to repair. I mean, I had people that it wasn't actually a patient, but it was somebody that I was out to lunch with, and she's telling me all the things that she needs for her life make her sick. She can't eat garlic. She can't eat sulfur foods. She can't. Every time she eats any of these things, and as life goes on, as she gets older, she can eat less and less foods that she needs. But we don't. That's part of our nature. We need to eat foods that not only contain natural sugars, but they also contain chemicals, natural chemicals that are part of the plant's defense system that's transferred to us so
Mm-hmm.
we can survive. That's the history of botanical medicine. If you go into the jungle, when we have one word for a plant, they'll have 60, 70 words.
Yeah.
Every little thing of the plant, they'll know. They won't know the stuff of modern life, but they'll know what life on this planet is.
So we have another question from Marion. Hi, Marion. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us tonight. And she's saying that one of her therapists advised that that Kalamata olive oil and pasteurized butter are very unhealthy. And she's cooking with olive oil, and Marion is asking, can I cook with coconut oil or what kind of oil? Because she recommended lard, and she's vegetarian.
No, definitely don't do lard.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. There's a lot of people with different cult type of understandings. Uh, it's not the oil. It's to make sure that the oils are not rancid. Certain oils get rancid very easily,
Mm-hmm.
especially if they get exposed to oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can get a type of olive oil that works for you, um, that's not only organic, but it's very carefully filtered for rancicity and poisons. That's a good one. Um, the only butter I would recommend is raw butter from an organic cow that's raised out in the grass. Then that's extremely healthy.
Yeah.
But even organic butter from the supermarket is not 100% pure.
I think Trader Joe's has this grass-fed organic butter by Marigold or the Clover or something.
Yeah, there's a lot of companies, but that's not even
Irish. It comes from Ireland. That's like particular ones.
those are all better than the average. But there's nothing better than getting it directly from the cow that's raised on grass,
Yeah.
but also raised in a fun environment. Cows are dependent on joy and fun.
Yeah.
It's a different butter. They've tested in Colorado
Yeah.
that cows that are played with and played ball with and all this. I mean, people's health recuperates. Uh, I heard a lecture by somebody that had a farm out there, and because of the way the law is written, everybody buys on a percentage of ownership of the cow. So it's your cow, even though you may own 5%. But if it's raised, especially raised. If you watch some of the games they play with cows, so with butting the ball with their head and you know and competing, the recuperation is outstanding.
Okay. Marion is asking another question. Do we need to stick to ancestral diet or can we venture out to California diet? Thank you, Marion. California cuisine.
I once watched a TED talk by a scientist, and the paleo diet, and this guy is an expert on the paleo times what people actually ate. It was a TED talk, and he said everything that people are saying in paleo had nothing to do with what people actually ate in those times, and he went over what particularly they ate. So what we do know is that at least what helped me is when I did my fellowship in blood types, is that it's different for many types, but blood types gives at least some sort of guideline. And um, so, but none of the rules are rigid because people adapted to it. So when people adapt to uh, the changes, I mean, when I go back to Dr. Fenley, who was my mentor, and I studied religious studies with him, he talked about religion, the study of religion, has nothing to do with spirituality. It was the study of economics and how people adapted when they moved from place to place.
Mm-hmm.
So blood type um, A's, they tend to not do well with garbanzos and tomatoes and nightshade vegetables. But when they moved from place to place, they started mixing. So garbanzo beans, they started mixing with tahini, which is sesame. And that combination worked fine for people that were blood type A's. But if they just ate them separately, because that wasn't part of their ancestral diet, they didn't have the genetics or the epigenetics. And that's a good story. Maybe next week we'll talk about epigenetics, because that's a better way of asking the question.
Yeah.
The epigenetics is what interprets for us our genetic expression.
Okay. Um, we still have some time, and but I was a few minutes of the time for the lecture, and I was thinking if you could go back to your idea, why did you bring up toxicity, energy, and calmness together in a combination, and maybe talk about the relationship and how do we move into that state of calmness?
That's a great question. What do you think? How do we move into that calmness?
There are many ways. Depends on which guru you are tuned
That's not what I'm.
into.
No, let's limit it to the guru
Yeah.
and look at what's.
The calmness for me is a state of mind.
Of course.
Definitely the perception of who you are and where you are and how you're doing.
Okay, now if you are working 12 hours a day, trying to raise a family and feed everybody, and you have deadlines, what's the potential for you to be calm?
There's no potential if you're not doing the inner work.
Okay, but what's the potential for you to actually be calm?
Mm. There's very little potential for you to be calm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why?
You're overwhelmed. You're overwhelmed. Your nervous system is overwhelmed.
Also, besides being overwhelmed?
Reflecting,
You're not being yourself.
being yourself. I thought that we meant to be busy 24/7.
Oh no. Oh no. I gave in this room here actually many years ago. I gave a lecture um, I think it was Introduction to Kabbalah and Mysticism and everything. And Michael Bachman, Dr. Bachman was here. He took the course that I was giving. And he said that we are designed to work 2.5 hours a day. That's what people did. So to spend 2.5 hours going out looking for food, hunting or gathering or whatever we were doing, depending on what era. And then we came home and we sat around the fire. We cooked a communal meal, told stories, mythology, and then depending on what time of year, the average, according to Stanford research, that wintertime people slept 12 hours a night, summertime people slept 8 hours a night. And if they had to go long-term hunting, they were given plenty of time to recuperate.
Hmm.
Do you know anybody that's operating like that today?
Retired people.
I don't even retired people only going, unless they're depressed. What are they doing? They're putting on the TV.
Yeah.
And then what happens when you watch TV? What do you think happens?
You're absent, you're not present.
No, your psyche is assuming what's on TV is what's happening to you. It's responding to things that are not part of your nature.
Mm-hmm.
What is that called? That's called ignorance.
Yeah.
If you ever had an experience with people that had no idea what they were talking about, were telling you everything that you're doing is it's not correct, that's literally what happens. So what's the key of getting joy? Okay, Nachman of Bratslav, we talked about him.
Yeah, we talked.
What did he say was joy?
Having purpose.
Yeah, but that's true, but that's not what he was talking about. He said a person that is full of joy is higher in spirituality than the greatest scholar that ever lived.
Mm.
So what gives us joy? It's a simple question. If you're doing something because you're waiting for some reward down the line, you're not doing it because you love to do it, and you're not joyful, what's going to happen to you? Your psyche will think that you have to be somebody else for you to get joy because what you're doing now is making you miserable. Now, if you're doing what you're doing now because you enjoy doing it and it's of service and there's meaning, that's going to lead you to joy.
Mm. So maybe today in meditation, if you don't mind, sort of incorporating something, elements of calmness and finding joy within, that'd be great.
Actually, joy is part of calmness.
When you're calm, you can be joyful.
That's when you experience joyful.
All right, I don't see any questions for tonight anymore. If you have any questions, you can always send questions to Dr. Cohen's email at centerforhealing@outlook.com. We're here to support you guys. Brother Dr. Cohen and Dr. Cohen's team is here to support you. You are fully functional, right, Dr. Cohen? You are open and available for appointments over the phone or in person. And as I said, especially those who were affected by fires and smoke, definitely schedule even a brief consultation
Or
just to get,
hurricanes.
or hurricanes.
No, I'm serious. I mean, this is,
Yeah. Or any natural disaster at this point, because it seems like the earth is very active at this time, and there's some sort of transformation is happening, probably a global shift of consciousness. Um, so yeah, we'll go into meditation.
okay. What was the one I'm supposed to, oh, joy and what?
Calmness.
Joy and calmness.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody have any requests or questions? Okay. So somebody asked about the product that I recommended for the T4 regulatory cells. That was Thymex, and we've used high doses for serious conditions like cancer, and we use it, but it is part of how our immune system. It's not the primary one for COVID, but it does especially when there's problems of permeability. Remember, if there's permeability in the gut, it's also permeability in the brain and the lungs. And the angiotensin receptors are in the lungs, they're in the kidneys. Pretty much it's looking like they're everywhere. Okay, take a deep breath. Just relax your eyes. Just remember that you're here tonight to re-energize yourself, to re-motivate yourself to get rid of toxic choices, particularly eating high amounts of sugar, chemicals. We definitely want to get rid of the heavy metals, and we want to eliminate fake food. I don't know about fake news, but definitely fake food we want to eliminate. And so as you go into the meditation, take a moment, have your eyes closed. This is a visualization. And watch yourself sitting quietly with all the stresses going around us. And we're producing sufficient amounts of dopamine, so we're feeling content and rewarded. We know we're exactly where we need to be for the most efficient evolution and our ability to contribute. So now just experience. Not only feel it in your head, feel it in your heart, feel it in your liver, feel it in your guts. Feel joy. That everyone listening tonight has at some point overcome impossible odds to earn this opportunity. And how deep your challenge is, the greater the opportunity. And all the mystical teachings tell us the joy coming through the heart is the path to healing, purpose, and making decisions that impact all of us in a way that we know that our lives have deep meaning. Take a few moments, experience that, and I'll join you shortly. Now look at yourself. If you're suffering from anything that's chronic and painful, allow yourself to visualize yourself freeing yourself from anything that limits the extent of your elegant experience. Take a few moments. Allow your body to accept the powerful input. Now take a few moments and experiencing yourself receiving not only love and acceptance, but compassion that you know that life is part of a journey, that it goes on through multiverses and realms that we cannot see or feel, but there are truths and spiritual insights that allow you to heal, grow, and feel connected to many beings. Some you can't see, some from a different time, or some that at one time were present in your life, but all have only your well-being in mind. You just have to be calm and receptive. Take a few moments and experience that. Now notice that there's something that's causing you discomfort or distracting you. Now bring your attention to whatever that is. And allow yourself to receive pure, clear light that fills your receptors, that energizes your oxidation patterns, makes you part of nature, and encourages you to become a container for light and the opportunity to live a life of meaning, purpose, and compassion. It gives you the strength to be drawn to what's only familiar, but to be drawn to the opportunities of making you powerful, focused, forgiving, and respectful. Then you make decisions that make you healthier, more spiritual, and more generous. May you be blessed by the light all around you, inside you, and may you have the insight to know it's all part of the same. Feel the love and support. It's lighting you up. And all that keeps you from being who you are. Let it dissipate as if it's smoke being driven out to sea. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Open your eyes. Take a deep breath. Experience the light. Stretched. Good night. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.